Hey everyone, it's Professor Clark, and in today's lecture, we're going to work on time on the hour. And I want to tell you to brace yourself. Telling time is one of the more challenging things you'll learn to do in second year. Probably not as challenging as verbs of motion, although many students fail to grasp the difficulty of verbs of motion the first time they meet them, and so they think they're a lot easier than they are. But the horror of telling time strikes people immediately. So be prepared. That being said, we're just working on time on the hour in this lecture, which is comparatively straightforward. So we're easing into telling time with what you will be happy to hear is the easiest of the time-telling expressions. So without further ado, let's jump into it. When we want to express time on the hour, we use the word czas, which means hour, and we also use it to mean o'clock, as in 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. If we want to ask the question, what time is it, we can say который час, which is more formal, or сколько времени, or сколько сейчас времени, which is more conversational. Either are completely fine. People are probably a little more likely to say сколько сейчас времени in casual conversation. The response to this is the correct clock time without prepositions. So if it's 1 o'clock, you would say час. If it's higher than 1 o'clock, if it's 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 8 o'clock or whatever, the number itself will be in the nominative, and the word час will be in the appropriate form of the genitive. So if we ask, сколько сейчас времени? What time is it right now? You could answer, сейчас час. Right now it's 1 o'clock. Сейчас 2 часа. Right now it's 2 o'clock. Сейчас 5 часов. Right now it's 5 o'clock. Note the stress shift. When you are telling time or counting hours, the word час will be n-stressed in the genitive singular. In other uses of the genitive singular, as we'll see later, it will be stem-stressed. But when you're actually telling time, it's going to be n-stressed, and we say 2 часа, 3 часа, 4 часа. If we want to say that something happens at a certain clock time, as we learned in the previous lecture, we use v plus the accusative, which is going to look just like the nominative for numbers. The question, if we want to say when or at what time, could be когда, when, в котором часу, note the stressed u ending, which is a little more formal, or во сколько, which is a little more conversational. Any of those can be used to ask the question, at what time? So, for example, we could say, во сколько начинается занятие? At what time does class start? And we could answer, for example, занятие начинается в 11 часов. Class starts at 11 o'clock. If we want to be more precise or more specific, and we want to have a clock time plus the time of the day, we put the time of the day in the genitive. So if you're just indicating time of day, you're going to put it in the instrumental. But if you have clock time plus the time of day, it's going to be in the genitive. So in the morning is going to be утро. Note the stress shift. Утро has the stress on the first syllable, but we put it in the genitive for this expression, and it becomes утра, n-stressed. If we want to say in the day or in the afternoon, we say dня, dня. In the evening is вечера, and at night is ночи. So for example, we could say Я встаю в 7 часов утра. I get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Занятие начинается в 11 часов утра. Class starts at 11 a.m. Class starts at 11 in the morning. Я обедаю в час дня. I have lunch at 1 p.m. or I have lunch at 1 in the afternoon. Я ужинаю в 7 часов вечера. I have supper at 7 p.m. or I have supper at 7 in the evening. Я ложусь спать в 11 часов вечера or ночи. That's a little bit, it could go either way. Normally noc starts at midnight, but if 11, if 11 feels late to you, you might say 11 o'clock at night. But I go to bed at 11 in the evening or 11 o'clock at night. So just remember that the time of day when used with a clock time is in the genitive. Утра, дня, вечера, ночи. And here on slide 5 of the PowerPoint, I have a little chart of clock time expressions. So it's divided into вопрос, the question, ответ, the answer, and the time of day if you want to indicate time of day. So if we want to ask the question, what time is it? We can say который час or сколько сейчас времени. To answer that question, we would say сейчас час, сейчас 2, 3, 4 часа, сейчас 5, 6, 7 часов. And then if we want to indicate the correct time of day, we could say утра, дня, вечера, or ночи. If we want to ask the question when or at what time, we can say когда or в котором часу or во сколько. And then the answer is going to be в час, в 2, 3, 4 часа, в 5, 6, 7 часов. And again, if we want to indicate the time of day, we just put it in the genitive, so утра, дня, вечера, ночи. If we want to talk about doing something for a certain amount of time, we use the accusative, just like we learned in the previous lecture. And the question is going to be сколько времени, just like the question, what time is it? However, this сколько времени is technically in the accusative. We just can't see that. So we could say, for example, сколько времени ты занималась в библиотеке? How long did you study in the library? And we could answer, я занималась в библиотеке час, or я занималась в библиотеке 2 часа, or я занималась в библиотеке весь день. All of those, час, 2 часа, весь день, are going to be in the accusative. We just don't see that it's the accusative here because it looks like the nominative. But if you said, for example, я работала всю неделю, then you'd see it was in the accusative. So this is just a review of something we've already learned, and we use it the same with clock time when we're counting hours as we do with days, weeks, months, or years. We just put the time in the accusative. Another expression with time that takes the accusative is when we use the preposition через plus the accusative to describe time. The preposition через means across, and it can be used to describe both time and space. When we use it with a time expression, it means later or a certain amount of time from now or in a certain amount of time, meaning in 2 hours, for example, like I'll leave for class in 2 hours or class starts in 2 hours, that kind of in a certain amount of time. So we could say, for example, я приду через час. I'll come over in an hour or an hour from now. Лекция начнется через 2 часа. The lecture will start in 2 hours or 2 hours from now or 2 hours later. Мы поедем во Францию через неделю. We'll go to France a week from now. And that's the use of через. It's quite straightforward. You just need to remember what it means. And that if we say в 2 часа, that means at 2 o'clock. Через 2 часа means in 2 hours. All right, this is where it starts to get tricky because this is where we have to start putting numbers in the genitive. And if you look on page 43 of your textbook, you'll see there's a table that includes the genitive forms of the numbers 1 through 12. So look at that and memorize it. When do we use these numbers in the genitive? If we have the prepositions до, meaning before, около, around or about, после, after, and с, meaning from or since, plus the genitive, we can use them with clock time or events to indicate where we are in relationship to that clock time or that event. So, for example, with до, before, we could say до часа, before 1 o'clock, до занятия, before class, до 3, before 3 o'clock, до лекции, before the lecture, до ужина, before supper. And note that here час is not being counted It's the object of a preposition, and so the stress is on the stem in the genitive, до часа. The same with около, which you're normally just going to use with clock time. Около часа, about 1 o'clock. Около двух, about 2 o'clock. Около четырех, about 4 o'clock. Около пяти, about 5 o'clock. Около двенадцати, about 12 o'clock. And with that, you can add часов, and if you do, it's always going to be in the genitive plural. Около двух часов, около пяти часов. But people will often leave the часов out. После, after, is often used both with clock time and with events. So после завтрака, after breakfast, после девяти, after 9, после занятия, after class, после обеда, after lunch. С, from or since, is normally going to be used in this sense just with clock time. So we can say с часа or с часу. Just like из дома or из дому, we have this archaic form of the genitive with certain words where we add u instead of a. If that's confusing, you certainly don't have to use it, but you do need to be aware that it exists and that other speakers might use it. So, с часа or с часу, since 1 o'clock or from 1 o'clock. С десяти, from 10 o'clock or since 10 o'clock. С одиннадцати, since 11 o'clock or from 11 o'clock. And then, if we want to say from a certain time to a certain time, we combine them and use с plus the genitive and then до plus the genitive. So, с часа до двух, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. С трех до четырех, from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. С семи до восьми, from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock. And finally, let's take a quick look at how to express approximate time in Russian. We can express approximate time with the use of около plus the genitive, but in casual speech, it is much more common to just reverse the time expression to indicate approximate time. Any preposition you have will still be placed directly before the numeral. So let's look at this chart at the bottom of slide 9 on the PowerPoint. If we have an exact time expression, we could have, for example, сколько времени? 2 часа. What time is it? 2 o'clock. But maybe it's like 1:57 or 2:03 or something. It's about to. You might ask, сколько времени? And if it's not exactly 2 o'clock, but it's sort of about to, it's like 10 to 2, 2:15, something like that, you might hear часа два. Notice that we reverse the word order. Часа два, about 2 o'clock. Or я ложусь спать в 10 часов. I go to bed at 10 o'clock, meaning 10 o'clock pretty much exactly. But I could also say ложусь спать часов в 10. I go to bed at about 10 o'clock. And notice that we have часов and then the preposition в and then the numeral 10. Ложусь спать часов в 10. Or приду через 3 часа. I will come in 3 hours. Versus приду часа через 3. I will arrive in about 3 hours. This is a really straightforward construction. To English speakers, it can seem a little weird because of the reversed word order, but as soon as you get the hang of it, it's really easy to use and very commonly used in casual spoken Russian. So that's it. That is clock time on the hour. Don't worry if you thought that was too easy and you were disappointed after the big build-up I gave you. Well, once you do clock time on the half hour or clock time off the hour, you'll see that clock time gives you lots and lots and lots of stuff to learn. But we're starting with just time on the hour, and I think that is plenty going forward for today. Enjoy your Russian and talk to you later.